So we're going to be picking up Quintus and Mayan Maimer Dalit from what we said yesterday. Yesterday we were talking about the worst of the worst is a mosquito. It's a bloodsucker. It just takes and doesn't give back. It's just taking and taking and taking. And today we're talking about how someone who does a sin is even worse than a mosquito or any other impure animal. Purely because any impure animal is doing its job. A mosquito was made to do a bloodsucker. It's not going against Hashem. A lion was made to be a animal that goes and preys on others. It's not going against Hashem. Suppose someone who's doing a sin is actively going against Hashem. Let's see this. You ready? We're up to the line that starts with Bechinas. You see where it says V'kolshken? V'kolshken, Shari B'Lechaim. How much more? So all other animals, Hatmeim, which are impure, even wild, bad, aggressive animals. All of them do not change their job. And Hashem's command to them, they spirit gods. Now, here's the thing. Why are we giving animals so much credit for doing what Hashem wants? For animals have no knowledge, they have no choice, and they for sure have no idea of Hashem. So here, we have something very, very important. Are you ready for what the Rebbe brings in? Even though they don't see it. So here, this is a line from a Gemara. It's a Gemara in Megillah. It's the only Russian words in Gemara. Mazlayu chazi. Mazlayu chazi. I'm kidding, it's not Russian. It means that even though they didn't see it, their mazel, which means their spiritual source saw it. So this is talking about a case in the Gemara in Megillah where it speaks about how they had Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, three prophets, and there was an angel that appeared to them, and all the men trembled. And it says there in the Gemara that they were the only ones only one of them was able to see the angel, but everyone else trembled. So Gemara asks, if they didn't see anything, why did they tremble? Why were they scared? What are you scared of? You didn't see anything. So the Gemara says, even though they didn't see it, their spiritual source saw it, and that caused them to be gripped by fear. So if you're ever walking down the road and you get the shivers, maybe your spiritual source is seeing something. Maybe not, but you never know. So the animal, its spiritual source knows to listen to Hashem, and that's reflected by the fact that in this world, it does what it's supposed to do. Meaning without their even realizing it or feeling it, but they just do what Hashem wants. Like it says in Bereshis, what does Hashem say in Bereshis? It says, the fear of you shall be upon all the animals of the land. Okay, and what does that mean? So the Gemara explains in Brachos, what does it mean? No bad animal will ever attack someone unless the person looks like an animal to them. So, have you ever been attacked by a bad animal? Yes. Yeah, what do you get attacked by? I think you get attacked by anything. But animals only attack people if they look like animals. It says in the Torah that animals are all scared of people.
You got attacked by a wasp.
You got attacked by a wasp. Okay, that's scary. No. But tzaddikim, that the image of God does not leave their face. Kol chis haaretz. Where are we up to? The tzaddikim, that their godly presence doesn't leave their countenance. Wow, what a great word. Kol chayis rois is kapim kamayu. All the bad animals, all wild animals, aggressive animals, are held off from them. They're scared of them. Like it says in the Zohar, about Daniel when he was in the lion's pit. So, what do we see over here? That animals are made to be scared of people because people have a godly spark. Animals should stay back from people unless the person acts like an animal, and he seems to animal like an animal. So a tzaddik has no reason to be scared of any animal because the animals. Obviously, the animal itself doesn't know anything about spirituality, but the animal's spiritual source sees the godliness and makes it scared of them, as opposed to if an animal attacks someone, it's because there's a problem with the person. And this is going to take us back to the following story. I heard the story in the name of several people, but I'm just going to read it the way it's presented here. That about 250 years ago, in the city of Fez, which is in modern-day Morocco. You know what that is? It's in northern Africa, up there in like the desert region. It's known as the Barbary Coast. You ever heard of the Barbary pirates? So there was a tzaddik. His name was Masud Al-Fasi, and he lived in Fez. He and a group of friends very much wanted to travel to Eretz Yisrael. One day they finally decided to pack their things, and they're going to travel 3,000 miles through the Sahara Desert to Eretz Yisrael. So traveling through the desert, you had to go in a caravan, a whole group of people, because the desert, great large desert, had all sorts of dangerous things. Those wild animals, those bandits, those robbers, poisonous snakes, sandstorms, the heat. If you didn't go with others, who knows what could happen to you. So a caravan in there, one of the scariest things they had was Barbary lions. Now, if you look it up, Barbary lions are now extinct. You know why they're extinct? They were such big, scary lions that the people who lived there, when they had guns introduced to the area, went around and shot them all. So they were heading out on their journey, and they tried to stop by every town they could to fill up their water and to minimize danger. From Fez, they went to Tripoli, and this took up a large amount of their traveling. So this large caravan moves very slowly, about the speed of walking, allowing them to cover about 15 to 25 miles a day. At this rate, the journey would take them a few months. When the first Friday approached, Rabbi Masud informed his friends it was time to stop and rest because Shabbos was coming. So they said, Rabbi Masud, we can't stop and rest here. This place is dangerous, and there are terrible, frightful Barbary lions here. You're endangering your life. Because of Pikuach Nefesh, life is at risk. We have to continue. So Masud didn't argue with anyone. He told his attendant, take our things off the camel, and we're stopping and staying. His friends told him, you're gonna die if you stay. It's terribly dangerous. And he said, no, I'm staying. Like, we can't stay with you. We're not willing to die just because you're crazy. So they continued, broken hearts, certain that Rabbi Masud and his attendant would never be seen again. The caravan moved on, and Rabbi Masud and his attendant stayed behind, finding a nice, quiet place to sit in the middle of the empty, barren desert. The attendant was very nervous. The danger they put themselves in was clear, but he knew that Rabbi Masud was a holy man. He looked on with awe, seeing his master's strong heart. As expected, after making Kiddush, the calm silence was suddenly pierced by a frightening roar of a great lion. It wasn't long until the attendant saw the lion stalking their very location. The attendant was fearful and grabbed his holy master by the shoulder. Rabbi Masud, seeing his attendant's fear, turned to him in the calmest tone. What do you fear? Look how calm the lion is. Nothing bad will happen to you. It says in the Pasuk, we'll tread on cubs and vipers, and we'll eventually ride on the back of this very lion you see. Because Hashem actually sent this lion to protect us until we reach inhabited land. Now please bring a boil of water so we can wash our hands for the Shabbos meal. Have no fear. With a trembling heart, the attendant began to prepare a bowl. His eyes locked with the fierce lion, who was so close, just outside the small ring in the sand that they were staying in. It was too much to bear, and he collapsed back to the ground. Masud looked a bit agitated and said, didn't I tell you? Just trust in Hashem. The lion won't enter our circle. Can't you see him resting just outside of him? His words didn't calm the attendant very much. You can imagine this massive lion sitting on his haunches right there, scratching the sand, with nothing to keep it at bay. With his hands shaking, he still managed to do his job and wash the hands of his holy master. When they finished the meal, Masud recited benching as if he was sitting at his own hand at the Shabbos table, safe, secure, and happily lay down to sleep for the night. The poor attendant couldn't sleep a wink. He kept his eyes open, watching the lion at every moment. When morning came, Masud got up and his attendant washed his hands. He davened Shachris as usual, made Kiddush, ate the Shabbos meal. He even managed to take an afternoon nap. He got up to daven Mincha, followed by Shalosh Shudas, then Mariv. He said Havdalah and escorted the Shabbos out with a Malava Malka, and then went to sleep. Masud rose early the next morning. The request he made the davening in the morning caused the attendant's heart to nearly jump out of his chest. Would you please saddle up the lion? It's time to continue on our journey. The attendant couldn't understand what he's saying. How can I do that? Masud told him, don't worry. To us, it's a tame animal. It's a behemoth. It's like a domesticated animal. His master's words convinced him, and he had strong faith, and he saddled up the lion. They got on the lion, and the lion moved with incredible speed, making its way through the desert in a very short time, soon arriving in the town of Tunis. As you can imagine, this massive Barbary lion approached the city. The Tunisians ran and shut themselves in their houses and locked the doors. They peered out from the safety of their windows and watched the lion march through the city until it arrived at the royal palace. Hearing the commotion, the Bey, which is the governor, approached the window, and below he saw this massive lion, with 2 people riding it just like a camel. What is it you want? Do you want to destroy the whole town with this terrible lion you brought to the city? Rabbi Masud said, you have my word, we'll do nothing wrong to the town. The lion will now peacefully return to the desert. The attendant unloaded their things from the lion, but Masud commanded the lion to return in peace. Do not harm anything or anyone, he told the lion, nor shall you roar nor raise your voice until you reach your place in peace. The lion turned around calmly, like a little sheep. 3 days passed and the caravan approached Tunis. The travelers looked terrible, travel-weary. They're covered in sand, their clothes torn, and terrible tail on their lips. They told with tears and moans that they had no choice but to leave their friend, the great rabbi, all by himself in the dangerous desert, where they were sure that by now he was just food for the lions. The people of Tunis heard the story. 3 days ago, they told them, a rabbi arrived in our city. He's a man, a miracle worker. He arrived in the back of a fearsome lion. Perhaps this is the one you left in the desert? The travelers couldn't believe their ears. Where can we find him? The people showed them where Rabbi Masud was staying. With great joy and surprise, they were reunited. Rabbi Masud and his attendants shared the story about the lion who protected them and brought them to safety. They hugged each other, thanking Hashem for saving them from certain death. Rabbi Masud became friendly with the people of Tunis, and he quickly realized how little they knew about the basic laws and halachas. And he decided to cancel his trip to Eretz Yisrael and remain there, teaching the people of Tunis the ways of Hashem and Torah. And he's remembered for uniting the people with the Torah. A really incredible, absolutely amazing story. So what do we see from this story? We see that tzaddik has nothing to fear from wild animal, because all animals are scared of a person. Only when a person acts like an animal, then is an animal looks at them like a person. What happened with Daniel, what happened with Daniel when he was thrown into the pit of lions? Daniel chapter 6. What happened was that Darius, the king, sent that Daniel should be thrown, and we're going to say this one in short, should be thrown into a pit of lions, and when he was thrown in, this is a way of putting people to death. So, they put him into the pit, but the whole time he was in there, the lion just sat around quietly. And with that, he got out, and everyone was so impressed with it, the king sent him home without any harm. So, now that we found out that as long as you act like a person, the animals are not scared of you. But when you act like an animal, you're lower than the animals, so therefore the animals attack you. So, let's continue on what we were saying. V'im kain, you see the line starts with Komesh Kosov? One who sins and goes against Hashem's will, afilu b'aver kala, even with a small aver, b'shas ma'isa at the time, hu b'tachlis harichok m'kedusha aliyuna. He's from the furthest distance from Hashem's holiness, which is the oneness and unity of Hashem. Because here, he's not. If you're going against Hashem, you're not expressing Hashem's oneness. You're saying, I'm separate from Hashem. I'm doing my own agenda. Further than all the impure animals, shkotzim, mosim, and creepy crawlies and insects, that all come from Sitra Achra and the clip of Avodah Zarah. Because remember, these things are all selfish. They're not expressing nullification, bittul to Hashem. So how much more so a person who's supposed to have some realization of Hashem, when he's going and being selfish, how much more so he's saying, there's no Hashem here, it's all about me. Levad kolam. Now besides for all the above, we're getting on to point number 2. You ready? We're going on to a completely separate conversation now. We've already finished the fact that someone who goes against Hashem is lower than an animal, because the animal at least is doing its job. A person who's going against Hashem is not doing his job. Now let's talk about the separation that's done through an Aveira. Okay, one of these is long-term, one is short-term. What we said until now was the short-term effect. When someone's doing an Aveira, they're 100% separate away from Hashem. They're saying Hashem's trying to connect to them. Hashem's not abandoning you, you're abandoning Hashem. Hashem's trying to connect to you, and you're saying, no way, I'm not interested in you. That's at the time of the Aveira. As soon as you finish the Aveira, you return to Hashem. Now let's talk about the long-term effect that an Aveira does. So let's have an example. Menachem, can you give me an example of an Aveira? What? There is a lot of them. Let's give one example. You have an example? Eating, beautiful. Eating the first fruits that you're supposed to bring to the Beis HaMikdash. Fantastic. So, at the time Or did you mean the first fruits from a tree before you wait 3 years for it to grow? Either one. Eating something you're not supposed to be eating. So at the time, you're completely disconnected from Hashem. As soon as you finish doing the Aveira, you return to Hashem. You say, Hashem, I'm sorry, I'm going to do better next time. And you come back to Hashem. But what's the long-term effect? Let's find out. You ready for the long-term effect? And for this, we're going to have to learn some ropology. Ropology, study of ropes. Beautiful word I just made. So besides being so far at the time of the Aveira, through this also in the long term, nifgam nafsha, his soul is blemished. Nifstak melikus, and it's cut off from godliness. Like it says in the Geras Tshuva, it's very important it says Perek. I'm sure you guys learned the Geras Tshuva. You know Perek and Perek Vav have a different take on this pasuk. He speaks about Jacob is the rope of his inheritance. You ready for this? We're going to talk about how every yid is connected to Hashem in a rope-like manner. It's the rope that connects the soul to Hashem. It's just like a rope that one side of it is tied above, and the other side tied below, meaning that it's a connection of the person's neshama, the way it is down here, to Hashem above. It's a drawing down of the neshama from its source, which is the lower hey, the Shem Havaya, of Hashem's name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So there's two Heys in the word. So the last Hey, which represents Malchus Tatzilus, which is the way that Hashem projects into the world, that's where the person's neshama is connected to. So, in simple words, it's the way the neshama is connected to Hashem. From there, it's drawn down and brings down to Olam Hazeh, to be invested in a person's body. So your neshama goes bungee jumping. The neshama is up there in Shemayim, connected to Hashem, and it's tied on with a rope, and then it goes and jumps right down into this world, but it's still connected with a nice, thick bungee cord. Yeah, it's very important to be connected with a cord. So, what's this cord made of? It's like, for example, a very thick rope. Shazer, which is made up of 613 small strands. You ever seen a thick rope? The way they make it, to take a whole bunch of small strands and they twist them together, right? If you have a really thick rope, then you take a bunch of ropes made of small strands and you use each of those as strands. Let's twist them together. You ever seen this? Do you have a rope in here? No. Oh well. So too, this bungee rope that the neshama came down to this world, it's also made up of 613 strands. Kol Matayag mitzvahs, which is made up of the 613 mitzvahs. In other words, the meaning of the bungee rope that connects your neshama to Hashem is that the neshama came down to this world, but it's still connected to Hashem through the 613 mitzvahs. So when someone goes against one of them, what happens? Give me an example, Menachem, of going against one of the mitzvahs. Eating not kosher. Menachem, give me a different example of going against one of the 613 mitzvahs. Not putting on tefillin. Very good example. How about passing your child through the fires to the Avodah Zarah Melech, or something more practical? Sorcery. Beautiful. So when someone does one of these, nifzak kevel adak, any small aveira, you have one little strand gets cut off. Snip, snip. And automatically, it also makes the whole rope weak. So we spread two things over here. When someone does any aveira, even a small aveira, what's considered a small aveira nowadays? What do people consider a small aveira? Someone goes and I'm having trouble thinking what's considered a small aveira, like a singular aveira, a not chorus aveira. Okay, so let's say someone wears not kosher tzitzis. So with that, you cut off on purpose, yeah? Not on purpose, whatever. It's a different discussion. So you cut off one little strand of your connection to Hashem. So now your connection through tzitzis is no longer existent. Also, your entire general connection is now a lot weaker. So having a problem, like it says in Alekach V'Libov, that having a small problem with the system is a problem with the whole system, right? If you buy an Amazon and you toaster oven and the light, when it goes ding, the ding doesn't work, the bell doesn't work, it doesn't make a problem with the oven's working fine, but that's enough of a reason to return it, because it's a faulty product. Terrible example. Let me give you a better example. If someone's pinky has an infection, it can cause damage to the entire body and make the whole person weak. Right? They need to get it medically examined as soon as possible. So, in other words, what does that have to do with what we're saying? That if someone has one small strand broken off in the connection to Hashem, you can say, oh, it's just one strand. Now the entire connection has a problem. With someone who's chayiv kores. You ready for what happens if someone does a big avera that's chayiv kores? For example, it's very hard to say big and small averas. It says in Pirkei Avos, you can't weigh out what's big and small. But what we do know is the effect of the avera. The after effect of the avera, some of them you cut off, snip, one strand. Some of them, like a chayiv kores, like when someone breaks Shabbos or something. Now what? He tears the me'il. Removes the badim from the oren. Nifsa kachevel gamri. You know what kares means? It means cutting off. You're bungee jumping from Hashem, and then you go, hey, let's do some crazy avera, and you take your machete out of your pocket, which was there for some reason, and you cut the whole strand. You cut the whole bungee cord. Nifsa kachevel gamri. The entire rope gets cut off. The nichras nafshe rechman al-san, his soul is cut off from its source in Hashem. So, before we go weiter, I'd just like to speak about this for 1 second. So every small avera, what is the so-called, I wouldn't say small and big, I'd say individual and general avera. What does the individual avera cause? What does it cut off? One strand. And what does that do to the whole rope? Weakens the whole rope. And what about general avera? A kares avera, the whole thing. By the way, what's the point of these strands? A connection is actually bringing down your life force. It's how tapped in you are to Hashem. I'd say better than strands. I'd say these strands are not strands of rope. Rather, they're like optic fiber cables. You know, they're bringing down your internet connection of you to Hashem. Every one that you break off, you feel Hashem a little bit less in your life. It's like a story of the Bacher who thought that I'll never be able to break Shabbos. I can never do such a thing. It would be so terrible. One time he broke Shabbos. And after that, he realized, breaking Shabbos isn't so bad after all. What happened? One time he did it, and he broke off his soul, and from then he was less sensitive. He didn't feel godliness. So this sounds very scary, and it's like, oh my God, I'm going to cut myself off from Hashem. I'm going to have no connection left. What can I do about it? So you should know that Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, later in Geras Tshuva, that when someone does Tshuva, and they return to Hashem properly, and they take upon themselves from now on to do better, and they do Tshuva Ilah, which is doing better and stronger from now on, they retie their connection to Hashem. They retie the rope with, he says, a doubled and redoubled knot, which means when you tie the rope back together, it's stronger than it was before. You're closer. Think about it. The rope is shorter if you have to have a knot in the middle. You're closer to Hashem. If you tie a really good knot, a Navy, what do they call it? Navy SEALs knot, something like that. Then the rope is actually at that point of the knot stronger than any other point. So, if someone's disconnected from Hashem, it's not that all hope is lost. You definitely shouldn't get yourself into that situation. It's a very dangerous situation. But now you can look at it as actually an opportunity to get even closer to Hashem. The fact that you messed up, that's no good. But now that someone messed up, he can take opportunity. It's like a learning curve. It's like when someone's in a bad situation, so they can become a stronger person from that. Do you want to get yourself into a bad situation and become a stronger person? Definitely not. But once you're in that situation, you become stronger and better. So, let's continue. V'nimtza, we find, with our two things above, the fact that someone is, when he does an Aveira, at that time, in the immediate, he's further away from Hashem than the lowest animals. And in the long term, he's cutting off his connection to Hashem, disconnecting his Wi-Fi. No one would ever do such a terrible thing. Imagine disconnecting your Wi-Fi. Would you ever do such a thing? No one would disconnect their Wi-Fi. I saw a good word. It's like dad wants to call a family meeting, so he unplugs the Wi-Fi and sits next to the router. Fine. V'nimtza, we find, through the short term and the long term that we just discussed, through the Yetzer Haras, terrible scheming and convincing you to go astray. Someone will slip up in doing an aveira it's only because of this spirit of stupidity, these silly ideas. That covers over him, takes him away from his das, his knowledge, his connection to Hashem. If he would never be seduced by the seducations of the Yetzer. Do you know what that means? It means basically be convinced by all the sweet talk of the Yetzirah. And he would just see the truth the way it is, meaning that through doing this Aveira, I'm going to be separate from Hashem's oneness, and I'm going to be the furthest away from Hashem, into the depths of the nethermost pit, way further, even further away from Hashem than all the Sitraka, the other side, the clippers of Avodah Zarah, and even further than Avodah Zarah. Hashem Yishmeel, God save us. So that was all in the moment. And then in the long term also, my soul shall be blemished, God forbid. You're going to make pigam over here, would be from the line, what the Alter was referring to, is what the Rebbe Rashab was referring to, is what it says in Tanya, that pigam can come from the Lashon Pagimas Hasakin. Menachem, you learning Shchita? No, your brother is, right? Okay, so he's trying to learn Shchita at least. Oh, the reason I care is very important. Because when you learn Shchita, you find out that if the knife has a pigam, which means a little chip or a nick, how do you say it in English? A chip in the knife, it's no good. So a pigam in the neshama could mean a chip, a little cut, a little bit missing of his rope, of his connection to Hashem. Exactly. Because of his deep down love to Hashem, in him, it's impossible for him to be separate from godliness. He would never be tripped up at all in the sin in any way. So every Jew wants to be connected to Hashem and doesn't want to disconnect. And there's no way he can disconnect. You know what it says in Hayom Yom? A Jew cannot and does not want to be separate from God. So only through the Yetzer Hara convincing him and tricking him that, there's no problem over here, then he's going to fall for it. Kitzer, you ready to say in short? The sinner is lower than even a mosquito, even from impure animals, and wild animals. Why? They keep doing their job from Hashem. Even if it's against their nature. How do we see that? That if there's a tzaddik, if there's someone who looks like a person, the animal, which nature is to attack people, is not going to attack it. In addition to the fact that he's disconnected from Hashem's oneness, more so, what's in the long term? He blemishes, he makes a chip, he takes away from the strands of his soul's connection to Hashem, by going snip to one of the strands of the rope. But because of the spirit of stupidity, the person doesn't feel like there's any problem. Can't wait for tomorrow.